I asked for a family meeting in January. Not a confrontation, I didn't want to call it that, even in my own head, because confrontation implied I was looking for a fight, and I wasn't. I was looking for an acknowledgement. Some small recognition that what was happening was real, and that it could be different. I called my mother on a Wednesday evening, and I said that Jess and I would like to sit down with her and Dad, just the four of us, to talk about some things. She said, of course. She said, was everything all right? I said yes, everything was fine, I just wanted to talk. We went on a Saturday afternoon. Kevin was not supposed to be there. He was there. He was in the kitchen when we arrived, leaning against the counter with a cup of coffee, and he looked at us with the particular ease of a person who has been briefed. My mother said, "Oh, Kevin stopped by, I hope that's okay." Jess looked at me. I said, "Sure." We sat in the living room, my parents on the couch, Kevin in the armchair, me and Jess on the love seat. I had thought about how to begin. I had written some things down, actually, not a script, just a list. The school play, the birthday cards, the beach trip, the Christmas morning. I had the list in my jacket pocket, and I didn't take it out. I said, "I want to talk about the kids." My father nodded, attentive. "I've noticed a pattern over the past few years," I said, "and I've been putting off saying something because I didn't want to make it into a bigger thing than it needed to be. But Nora is getting older. She's starting to notice things, and I think we need to talk about it." My mother said, "What kind of pattern?" I told her. I was specific. I named dates and events. Marcus's birthdays, the ones my parents had shown up to with balloons and stayed for hours. Nora's birthdays, the cards, the school play, the beach trip, Christmas morning, the gift bag. I kept my voice even. I was not accusing them of anything, I said. I was describing what I had observed. When I finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then my mother said, "I think you're being a little unfair." I had expected this. I had prepared for it. "Okay," I said. "Help me understand where I'm wrong." Marcus and Chloe and Theo. We see them more because Kevin lives closer. 15 minutes, Jess said, quietly, just the fact. My mother glanced at her. "And they've needed more help." Diane went back to work when Theo was young and Kevin was traveling for work. "We asked you to babysit twice," I said. "You were busy both times." "We weren't," she stopped, started again. "We try to be fair." "Mom," I kept my voice gentle. "The school play. Nora had a part, she saved you seats. She was looking for you in the audience." My mother looked down at her hands. "That was a difficult week," she said. "Marcus had a tournament." "It was a soccer practice," I said. "It wasn't even a game." Kevin shifted in the armchair. I looked at him. He had the expression of a man who had walked into something and was deciding how to handle it. "I think," he said, "you might be reading into things a bit." "Kevin, I'm serious." His voice was easy, measured. The voice he used when he wanted to sound reasonable. "Mom and Dad love Nora. They love all the grandkids. But you're sitting here with this list of grievances and you're making it sound like—" "I'm not making it sound like anything. I'm telling you what happened. Kids get different gifts at different ages. Different experiences. That's not favoritism, that's just—" She asked me if Grandma forgot about her. I said it plainly. No emphasis, just the sentence. Kevin stopped. My father, who had been quiet through all of it, looked at the floor. "She's 7 years old," I said. "And that's the question she asked me on Christmas morning." The room was quiet again. My mother said, "We'll do better." She meant it. I believed that she meant it in the moment. I think she did mean it. The way people mean things when they are in the room with the consequence of their choices, and the feeling is acute and real. "I hope so," I said. We drove home mostly quiet. At a red light, Jess reached over and put her hand on my knee. "You did well," she said. "Do you think anything will change?" She took her hand back, watched the light. "I think they believe they'll change," she said. What happened instead was the rewriting. It started within the week. My mother called my father's sister, who called me, who told me my mother was upset that I had ambushed her, that I had brought a list, that I had been accusatory. I had not brought a list. I had kept it in my pocket. Kevin called me on a Tuesday. He was friendly, the way he always was, that disarming warmth that made everything he said sound like concern. "I just want to check in," he said. "You seemed really stressed at Mom and Dad's." I wasn't stressed. I was making a point. Right. A pause. I worry sometimes that you've got this narrative in your head about how things are and it's coloring how you see everything. Mom and Dad love Nora, you know that. I'm not questioning whether they love her. Then what are you questioning? How they show it. Or don't." Another pause, shorter. "I think," he said carefully, "that having kids is hard, and comparing kids is hard. And I think you might be making Nora feel like she's in competition with my kids, and that's not fair to her." I had to sit with that for a second, because it was cleverly done. He had taken my concern and reversed it, made me the source of Nora's discomfort, made my noticing the problem into the problem itself. "She's not in competition with your kids," I said. "She just wants her grandparents to show up." "They show up. Kevin, the school play. One time." "It's not one time." I stopped, breathed. "It's a pattern, and I'm not going to pretend I don't see it." He went quiet for a moment. Then, "I think you should talk to someone professionally. I'm not saying that to be mean. I genuinely think there's something going on with you that isn't about mom and dad." I said thank you for calling. I hung up. For about 3 days after that, I turned it over. I went back through the events I had described, and I looked at them from the angle Kevin had offered, and I tried to see if he was right. Maybe I was making it into something. Maybe I was mapping my own childhood onto Nora's experience. Maybe the gift bag at Christmas had just been a gift bag. On the third night, I was sitting at the kitchen table when Jess came in and put her phone down in front of me. "Look at this," she said. On the screen was a spreadsheet. Jess had been keeping records for 2 years. That was the thing about her I had always relied on without fully understanding. She saw patterns, and when she saw a pattern she didn't like, she documented it. Not obsessively, she wasn't building a case, she told me. She was just keeping track in the quiet, methodical way she kept track of everything important. She had a folder on her phone. The spreadsheet had dates, events, what had been promised and what had happened. What Kevin's kids had received versus what Nora had received at birthdays and holidays and ordinary occasions. There were screenshots, text messages from my mother, including one where she said she would absolutely be at the school play, sent 4 days before she missed it. There were photos I hadn't known Jess had taken at Christmas, the gift receipts she'd kept when Nora's presents arrived, a note about the beach house my parents rented that summer. She had screenshots of Instagram. My mother's account, mostly, photos of Kevin's kids, tagged and captioned with a warmth and detail that her occasional photos of Nora did not have. I scrolled through it for a long time. "Why didn't you show me this before?" I said. "You weren't ready before," she said it without judgment. "You needed to try it your way first." I looked at the screenshot of my mother's text. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The play sounds adorable. I thought about Nora in her rabbit ears, scanning the dark gymnasium. "What do I do with this?" I said. "Whatever you think is right," she said, "but now you have it." I didn't call my parents. I didn't send the spreadsheet to Kevin. I just sat with it for a while. The particular feeling of being handed evidence of something you already knew but couldn't prove, it isn't satisfying exactly. It's more like the end of a kind of loneliness. The loneliness of being the only person in the room who can see what you're seeing. Jess had seen it too. She had seen it for 2 years and said nothing until I was ready. I reached across the table and took her hand. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. The change was not dramatic. I didn't issue an ultimatum. I didn't make a speech. I simply began making different choices about how much access my parents had to Nora's life. And I made those choices quietly, the way you reroute around something without announcing the detour. We stopped going to my parents' house when Kevin's family was there. I told my mother we found those gatherings a little overwhelming for Nora, which was true in a way that didn't require elaboration. We began spending holidays differently, sometimes at Jess's parents', who lived an hour away and who loved Nora with a completeness that still occasionally surprised me. Sometimes just the 3 of us, which turned out to be its own kind of gift. My parents still saw Nora. I wasn't cutting them off. I wasn't punishing anyone, or not only that. I was just protecting a perimeter, choosing where Nora spent her emotional energy and with whom. And something happened. Nora got lighter. I noticed it over months, not days. She laughed more easily. She stopped doing the things she'd been doing at family gatherings, that careful, contained watching from the edge of the room. She asked about her cousins sometimes, the way kids ask about people they know without being close to, and I answered the questions, and that was that. She started a new thing that year, a drawing class at the community center on Saturday mornings. She came home every week with something, animals, landscapes, strange, abstract shapes she gave elaborate names. She taped them to the wall in her room until the wall was covered. One Saturday she came home and handed me a drawing before she even took her coat off. "It's us," she said. It was, recognizably in the way a child's drawing is recognizable. The heights roughly right, the details chosen according to some interior logic. Me and Jess and Nora in front of a house, all 3 of us with large circular hands. The sun was yellow and enormous. I put it on the refrigerator. Later that night, after she was asleep, I stood in the kitchen looking at it. I thought, this is what she sees when she thinks about her family. Not the extended version, not the gathering at my parents' house. This. The three of us. She was fine. More than fine. I had been so focused on what she was missing that I had not fully absorbed what she had. Kevin moved 18 months later. His company offered him a position in another city, a significant one, money and title and the kind of opportunity that reorganizes a life. He took it. He and Diane and the kids relocated in June to a place 4 states away, and my parents drove out to help with the move and spent a week there and came back quieter than they'd left. My mother called me more often after that. I noticed the shift but did not comment on it. She asked about Nora with a specificity she hadn't had before, what grade she was in, what she liked, whether she was still doing the drawing class. I answered the questions. I kept the calls at a comfortable length. She started asking to visit. We arranged it, a Saturday afternoon lunch at our house. My mother brought flowers and a gift for Nora, a set of nice colored pencils, the kind for serious drawing, not the cheap ones from the drugstore. She'd asked me what Nora was into. She'd actually asked. Nora was polite. She said thank you. She showed my mother some of her drawings, standing a little apart, not quite leaning in. My mother looked at them with what seemed like genuine attention. "You're very talented," she said. Nora said thank you again. After my parents left, I asked Nora what she thought. She considered it for a moment, the way she considered things now. She was 11, and she had developed a quality of interior deliberation that I recognized and loved. "She's different," Nora said. "How do you mean?" "I don't know." She picked up one of the pencils from the new set, turned it over in her hands. She seemed like she was trying. "Does that feel good?" Another pause. "It feels kind of late," she said. Then she went back to her drawing. My father had a health scare 2 years after Kevin moved away. Nothing catastrophic, a cardiac event, caught early, a procedure, a recovery that took several months. I drove out 3 weekends in a row during that period. I brought food and sat with him and helped my mother with things around the house. I did this because he was my father and he was sick, and that mattered, regardless of the larger accounting between us. He thanked me one afternoon, sitting in the living room with a blanket on his lap and the curtains open to the winter yard. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. "Yes, I did," I said. "You're my dad." He looked at me for a moment. "I think we let you down," he said. "You and Nora." I didn't answer immediately. "I think there's some truth to that," I said. He nodded. His jaw moved slightly, the way it did when he was working through something he didn't have easy language for. "We didn't mean to," he said. "I know. He stopped. "Kevin needed more. I don't know if that's true or if we just told ourselves that, but that's how it felt. I thought about my father's sister calling me, about Kevin on the phone asking if I was talking to someone professionally, about my mother's hand on Marcus's shoulder while Nora stood at the edge of the room. "I know," I said again. We sat there for a while. The yard was gray and bare. A bird moved through the branches of the oak tree at the fence line. "I'd like to know her better," he said. "Nora, if she'd let me." "That's up to her," I said, "but I won't get in the way of it." He nodded. I drove home that evening thinking about what it costs to say something like that. The weight of a man in his late 60s, sitting under a blanket, trying to say he was sorry without quite being able to say the whole word. I didn't hate him for it. I wasn't sure I had it in me to hate either of them. But the distance remained. Not hostile, just honest. Nora was 15 when she told my parents what she remembered. It wasn't planned. We were at their house for Thanksgiving. We'd been going back for the past 2 years, carefully in a configuration that worked, now that Kevin's family was 4 states away and holidays had a different shape. It was a small gathering. Me and Jess, my parents, a neighbor couple my mother had grown close to. After dinner, my mother asked Nora about school. And Nora answered. She was in an honors English class. She was doing a unit on memoir. Her teacher had asked the students to write about a formative memory. My mother asked what she had written about. Nora looked at her. There was a beat, just a second, the length of a decision being made. "The school play," Nora said, "when I was 6. The table went quiet in a particular way. "You were in a play," the neighbor woman said warmly. "I had a small part. I was a rabbit." She kept her eyes on my mother. "I saved seats in the 3rd row. I was really excited. I'd been practicing for weeks." My mother had gone very still. "I looked for you when I came out on stage," Nora said. "In the dark, I found Dad and Mom, and then I looked at the seats I'd saved, and they were empty." She said all of this without visible emotion, the tone of someone recounting a fact, which was more devastating than anger would have been. "You told me it was because of Marcus," she said. "A soccer thing." Nora, my mother's voice was careful, fragile. "I'm not angry," Nora said, and I believed her, which was the most remarkable part. "I just think about it sometimes. That was the first time I understood that you were two different kinds of grandma. To them and to me." My father looked at the table. My mother's eyes were wet. "I remember the Christmas when I was 7, Nora continued. She was looking at her plate now. "The gift bag, I remember asking Dad if you forgot about me." She paused. "He said no." I could tell he didn't know what to say. "We're sorry," my mother said, the word coming out at last simply without architecture around it. "Nora, we're so sorry." Nora nodded. "I know," she said. She picked up her fork and continued eating. And I sat at that table in the particular stunned quiet that follows an irrevocable thing, watching my parents reckon with what a 15-year-old girl had just said to them in a voice so composed it offered no handhold, no anger to push back against, no tears to console, just the flat, clear accounting of what she remembered. My mother cried quietly for the rest of the meal. My father did not speak much. The neighbor couple talked about something else, gently, the way kind people do when they understand that a room needs covering. On the drive home, I asked Nora if she was okay. "Yeah," she said. "I've wanted to say that for a long time." "How does it feel?" She thought about it. "Small," she said. "I thought it would feel bigger." I nodded. "That's usually how it goes," I said. She leaned her head against the window and watched the dark highway go past. The years after that were quiet in the way that healed things are quiet. My parents tried. I want to say that clearly because it matters. They tried in the way that people try when they understand the trying is necessary and may not be enough. My mother remembered Nora's birthday. She came to her high school graduation. She sat in the gymnasium without being reminded, and she found us in the crowd, and she hugged Nora and said she was proud of her. Nora hugged her back. It was not a warm hug. It was not a cold one either. It was the hug of a young woman who had decided to leave a door ajar without walking through it. Kevin's kids were teenagers by then. They called my parents occasionally, texted on holidays, visited once a year if schedules allowed. The grandchildren who had consumed so much, so many Saturdays, so many summers, so many Christmas mornings, had grown into people with their own lives and their own schedules and their own priorities, as teenagers do. My mother mentioned this once, not as a complaint exactly, more as a bewildered observation. "They're just so busy," she said. "Yeah," I said, "kids get busy." She heard what I didn't say, or maybe she didn't. I had stopped needing her to. Nora graduated from college on a Saturday in May. We drove up the night before, a hotel near campus, dinner at a place she'd chosen, the four of us. Me and Jess, Nora, and her boyfriend. A quiet, thoughtful young man named Sam who had figured out the quickest way into my estimation, which was to listen more than he talked. The ceremony was in the morning, under a white tent on the main lawn, 300 graduates in gowns the color of the school's colors. It was warm and slightly humid, and the speeches were too long, and I didn't care about any of that. I watched Nora walk across the stage. She had my dark hair. She'd always had my dark hair. And she walked with the particular ease of someone who knew what they were doing, who had been doing it for 4 years and was not surprised to have arrived here. She shook the dean's hand. She turned and found us in the stands. She found us the way she had always found us, that unerring instinct. She grinned. After the ceremony, in the milling crowd on the lawn, she found me first. She hugged Jess, hugged Sam, and then she came and put her arms around me, and I held on for a moment. "Thank you," she said. "You did it, I barely." "Not for that." She pulled back and looked at me. "For the other stuff." I didn't ask her to specify. I knew what the other stuff was. It was the Saturday mornings I drove her to drawing class, the hot chocolate after the school play, the years of choosing, quietly and without announcement, to put her somewhere safe, the times I had looked at my parents and seen clearly and not looked away, even when looking away would have been easier, the times I had refused to let her believe that love was something you had to earn. "You're going to be great," I said. She rolled her eyes in the way she'd been rolling her eyes at me since she was 12, and then she grinned again and went off to find her friends. I stood on the lawn with Jess beside me, the crowd moving around us, the tent filtering the May light into something warm and directionless. "You good?" she said. "Yeah," I said, "I'm good." And I was. My parents thought they were choosing between grandchildren. What they were really choosing was which family they were willing to lose. They chose the one that felt easier, the one that required less effort, less intention, less of the particular work that loving someone who isn't exactly convenient sometimes demands. They chose the path of least resistance, the way people often do when they aren't paying attention to what they're giving up. And by the time they understood what the choice had cost them, by the time they sat at a Thanksgiving table and heard a 15-year-old girl describe, in a voice without trembling, what she remembered, the choosing was already done. It had been done on a Christmas morning, in a question asked by a 7-year-old in a red dress. Did Grandma forget about me? She had not been forgotten. She had been deprioritized, set aside, measured against cousins she hadn't asked to be measured against, and found not lesser but less convenient. That is a different thing than forgetting. In some ways it is worse. But she grew up knowing she was loved, not by everyone who should have loved her, but by the people who showed up, who drove her to drawing class, who saved her hot chocolate, who stood in the gymnasium in the dark and made sure that when she looked out from the stage, there was always a face looking back. That was enough, more than enough. It was, in the end, everything. I didn't sleep that night. Rachel was in the guest room. She'd offered to leave entirely, go to her sister's. And I'd said no, stay, because Lily was home and Lily didn't know anything yet, and I needed that to remain true for as long as possible. So Rachel was down the hall and I was in our bed in the dark, staring at the ceiling. I kept thinking about my mother's voice on the phone. Rachel loves you, you know that. Don't make something out of nothing. You two are solid. She had said those things. I could hear them precisely, the warmth of them, the certainty. She had known. At some point, the ceiling stopped being something I could look at. I got up and went downstairs and sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water I didn't drink, and I thought about the Easter Sunday when my mother and Rachel had been standing too close at the counter. I thought about the pause when I walked into a room. I thought about Marcus on the phone, David, I'm so sorry, in a voice that sounded like relief. I thought about all the times my mother had told me I was imagining things. By the time morning came, I had made a list in my head, not of what I was going to do, of what I needed to understand. I dropped Lily at school. I told Rachel I would be gone most of the day and she nodded and didn't ask where. Then I drove to my parents' house. My mother answered the door. She took one look at my face and she knew that I knew. I watched it happen, the recognition, and then something collapsing behind her eyes, a structure she'd been maintaining giving way all at once. She stepped back from the door. I came in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd eaten breakfast for 18 years. Where my father had read the paper every Sunday morning, where my mother had helped me with homework and signed permission slips and told me, at various points in my life, things I had believed completely because she was my mother and I trusted her. She didn't say anything at first. Neither did I. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, a garbage truck moved down the street. How long, I said. She pressed her lips together. Sandra. It was the first time I'd used her name in that house, and we both felt it. How long have you known? She exhaled. A little over a year, she said. A year? I had come here with the number Rachel had given me, a year and 8 months for the affair. And my mother had known for a year, which meant she had found out 6 or 8 months in, which meant she had carried it through 2 holidays, through Lily's birthday, through a dozen Sunday dinners. How did you find out? I said. Rachel told me. She said it quietly, like the quieter she said it, the less it would weigh. She came to me. She said she'd made a mistake and she didn't know what to do. She stopped. She was frightened. She was frightened, I repeated. She didn't want to lose her family. The word family landed strangely. I sat with it for a moment. What did you tell her? My mother looked at the table. I told her she needed to end it. And she said she was trying. And you believed her. She stopped again. Her hands on the table were folded together the way they folded in church. I thought if I pushed too hard, she'd leave, I thought. You thought what, Mom? The question came out harder than I intended. She flinched slightly. I thought if I told you the marriage would end, she said. And then Lily would, she couldn't finish. Lily would what? We'd lose her, she said. Your father and I if you divorced and Rachel moved and... I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't knock anything over. I just stood up because I needed to be standing and not sitting at that table anymore. You knew a man was in your son's marriage for over a year, I said. You sat across from me at dinner every week. You told me I was imagining things. You looked me in the face and told me Rachel loved me. My voice was level. I was working to keep it level. You did that because you were afraid of losing your granddaughter. She was crying now. Quietly, the way she cried, contained, careful. We didn't know what else to do, she said. You could have told me. We thought. Don't, the word came out before I could organize it. Don't tell me what you thought you were protecting, because whatever it wasn't me. I left her at the table. My father was in the living room. He had heard. He looked at me when I came through the doorway, and I looked at him, and I could see in his face that there was nothing he was going to say that would help either of us. He was a man who, when confronted with the most painful moments of family life, went very still and waited for them to pass. This one wasn't going to pass. You knew too, I said. It wasn't a question. He nodded. Just once. I put my jacket on and I walked out the front door. I sat in my car outside their house for a while. Then I called Marcus. He picked up on the second ring. He had been expecting this call, I understood now. Had been expecting it since the night before, since I'd called him from the parking lot after seeing Rachel and Thomas walk out of that elevator. Since that pause, I hadn't understood on the other end of the line. How long, I said. He was quiet for a moment. 7 months, he said. 7 months. My brother had known for 7 months. Rachel called me, he said. I want you to know I didn't go looking for it. She called me and said she was in trouble and she needed to talk to someone who wasn't your parents. And you didn't tell me. David, you didn't tell me. I kept thinking she was going to end it. She kept saying she was going to end it. And every month I thought, okay, this month she'll actually do it, and then I won't have to tell you because there'll be nothing to tell. I listened to this. I let him finish. I was wrong, he said. I know that. I knew it at the time and I kept choosing wrong anyway. Did you cover for her? Silence. Marcus. Once, he said. You asked me if I'd seen her on a Friday night. You said she'd told you she was with me. She called me and he stopped. I confirmed it. I had asked him that. I remembered. A Friday in October. I had asked casually, the way you verify something without wanting to make a thing of it. He had said yes. I had believed him. You lied to me, I said. Yes. To protect her. To protect, he stopped. I don't know who I thought I was protecting. I hung up. Claire called me 20 minutes later. I didn't answer. She texted, David, please talk to me. Then, I'm so sorry, please. I pulled over and read the texts and put the phone face down on the passenger seat. I drove to a parking lot near a park I'd taken Lily to when she was small, where she'd learned to ride her bike on the path along the waterfront. I parked and looked at the water. I thought how many people knew about this, and then, because I needed to know rather than wonder, I called Claire. She answered immediately. David, did you know? A breath. Yes, she said. How long? Since I found out from Mom, about 6 months ago. Did you say anything to me? I wanted to. I almost called you 3 times. But you didn't. No. Why? She was crying. I could hear it in the way she was breathing. I didn't know how, she said. And I kept thinking Mom was handling it, that she'd told Rachel to end it and it was going to end and maybe it would all just... She stopped. I'm sorry, I know that's not good enough. It's not, I said. I didn't say it to be cruel. I said it because it was true, and the space between us had gotten too small for anything that wasn't true. Aunt Patricia confirmed it in a text, 2 hours later. I hadn't called her. She had heard through my mother, apparently, the family telephone line working in its usual direction, and she texted me directly, David, I'm devastated. I only found out recently. I should have called you. I'm so sorry. Recently. What recently meant to Aunt Patricia, I would find out later, was 4 months. Joel was last. Joel, who had been my best friend since college, who had stood beside me at my wedding, who had held Lily in the hospital hours after she was born, this large, gentle man sitting in a plastic chair holding a 6-pound newborn with the focused care of someone terrified of doing it wrong. And I had taken a photo of it, and it was still on my phone. I called him that evening. He picked up. I said, tell me. He said, 8 months. I didn't say anything. Rachel reached out to me, he said. She said she needed someone to talk to who was outside the family. He exhaled. I told myself I was helping, that I was keeping her stable so she'd end it, that I was. He stopped. I don't know what I told myself. Nothing that sounds okay now. Did you lie to me? No, I never, he paused. I didn't lie, but I knew when you talked about her and I let you believe things that weren't true. That's not different enough, I know. No, I said, it's not. I should have told you. Yes. David, I know, I said. I stayed on the line for another moment. Then I said, I can't talk to you right now. I hung up. I sat in the house that was quiet because Lily was at a neighbor's, that Rachel was moving through like a person trying to take up as little space as possible, and I thought about all of them, the whole architecture of it. Not just the knowing, the active parts. My mother telling Rachel to end it, as though she had the authority to manage my marriage without my knowledge. Marcus confirming an alibi. The family telephone line, functioning for over a year, carrying information about my life that I was not party to. They had not simply stayed silent. They had organized around the secret. They had made choices, repeatedly over months, that prioritized something over me. I needed to understand what that something was. I went back to my parents' house the following morning. My mother was in the kitchen. My father was at the table. They both looked like they hadn't slept, which was accurate, which should have moved me and did, at some layer underneath the anger. I sat down. "I need you to tell me why," I said. "Not what you were protecting, why you thought you had the right to make that choice." My father looked at the table. My mother wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "We were scared," she said. "Of what specifically?" "Of everything falling apart." She said it like it was simple, which I suppose it was. "You and Rachel divorcing, Lily going through that. Rachel moving, she talked about moving to be near her family if things fell apart, and then we'd lose. You'd lose access to Lily." "It sounds, is that what it was?" "Partly," she said. The honesty of it surprised me. I had expected more architecture around it, more justification, more framing. She just said it. "Partly, they had kept my wife's secret for over a year, because they were afraid of losing their granddaughter." "What's the other part?" I said. She was quiet for a moment. "We didn't want to be the ones who broke your marriage," she said. "If we told you and you divorced, we'd have been the reason. If Rachel ended it on her own and you never found out, the marriage would survive and no one would." "No one would what?" "No one would be hurt." I looked at her. "I was being hurt," I said. "The entire time, for 18 months, every dinner I sat across from my wife who was lying to me. Every night I stopped, steadied. You decided that my not knowing was the same as my not being hurt. Those aren't the same thing." She didn't answer. "You protected the structure," I said. "The holidays, the Sunday dinners, the grandparents with the granddaughter. You protected the shape of the family. And to do that, you needed me to stay inside it without knowing what the inside actually looked like." My father shifted. "We thought we were protecting the family," he said. It was the most he'd said since I'd arrived. I looked at him for a long moment. "You protected everyone," I said. "Rachel, the marriage, your access to Lily, the appearance of everything being fine." I paused. "Everyone except me." He looked at the table. My mother was crying again. My father was doing what he did, going very still, waiting. I stood up. "I need to ask you something," I said, "and I want you to think about it before you answer." They both looked at me. "If Dad had been cheating on you," I said, "for almost 2 years, and I found out, and I didn't tell you," I kept my voice even, "would you have wanted me to stay silent?" My mother's face changed. My father looked at the window. Neither of them answered. The silence lasted long enough that we all understood it was the answer. I picked up my jacket. "I'm going to need some time," I said. "A lot of it." I walked out of that house. I did not know at that moment how long a lot of it was going to be. The divorce took 8 months. Rachel was not difficult about it, I'll give her that. She was cooperative in a way that felt like penance, which I neither needed nor discouraged. We divided things without litigation, worked out a custody arrangement for Lily that put her first and our damage second. Lily would spend the school week with me, weekends with Rachel alternating, and we would both show up to the things that mattered and behave like adults when we did. Rachel moved to an apartment 20 minutes away. Thomas Reeves was not a factor she introduced into Lily's life for a long time, which was either decency or self-preservation, and I didn't particularly care which. I started therapy in April. My therapist, a calm and precise woman named Dr. Acaffer, had a way of asking questions that made the answers feel like my own, which I found both more useful and more difficult than being told what to think. We talked about the affair. We talked about the family more than I expected to. "What made the family's silence harder than the affair?" she asked, 4 sessions in. I thought about it. "The affair was Rachel's decision," I said. "About herself, about us. It was a thing she did. And the family's silence was a decision about me," I said. "They looked at the situation and they decided collectively that I was the variable that could be managed. The one who could be kept in the dark. The one whose knowledge or ignorance was something they had the right to control." She let that sit for a moment. "How did that feel to discover?" "Like being the last person in a room to understand the joke," I said. "Except the joke was my life. I didn't call my parents for 4 months. When I finally called, it was a Sunday, and I told my mother that I would maintain a relationship with her and my father for Lily's sake, and that I would be civil, and that they should understand the relationship would not be what it had been. She said she understood. She said she was grateful for even that. I said I would need her not to tell me she was sorry again, because she had said it and I had heard it, and it wasn't the thing that needed to happen now. She said okay. We settled into a shape that fit neither of us but held. Marcus I spoke to eventually. We met for coffee 8 months after everything. He was quiet through most of it, letting me set the pace, and I found I had less to say to him than I'd expected. The anger had metabolized into something cooler. He had been wrong, he knew it. I knew it. We were brothers and would presumably remain brothers in some form across the remaining decades of our lives. But the easy intimacy of calling him when things went wrong, that didn't come back. Joel I saw once at a mutual friend's event 2 years later. We spoke briefly. He had a new baby, a girl. He showed me a photo. I said she was beautiful, which she was. We didn't make plans. Some things that break don't reassemble. Not because the people involved stopped trying, but because what they'd had was built on a particular kind of trust. And that kind of trust is not a thing you can reconstruct from parts. My parents asked to reconcile about 3 years after the divorce. They had not stopped trying to maintain contact. They saw Lily regularly, which I had kept separate from my own relationship with them, which was the right thing to do and also, some days, the hardest. My mother called periodically. My father sent texts that were brief and carefully worded, the digital equivalent of leaving a door slightly open. They asked to meet in person, the two of them and me. Dinner, they said, just the 3 of us. I went. We sat at a restaurant, Neutral Ground, which was my father's idea, which showed more social intelligence than I'd given him credit for. My mother had gotten older in the way that people get older when they are carrying something, not frail exactly, but tired in a way that lived in her face. She said she was sorry. My father said he was sorry. They meant it. I had no doubt about that anymore. The sorrow was genuine, had been genuine for years, and had not made anything different. I listened. I thanked them for coming. Then I asked the question I had asked in their kitchen 3 years before. If Dad had been cheating on you, I said, and I knew, and I kept it from you for a year. I looked at my mother. Would you have forgiven me? She was quiet for a long moment. My father looked at the table. I don't know, she said. It was more honest than the silence 3 years ago. I'm not sure I fully forgive you, I said. I want you to know that I'm not saying that to punish you. It's just where I am. She nodded. But I'm not going to keep punishing you either, I said. You're Lily's grandparents. You love her. That's real. And she should have that. My father looked up. Thank you, he said. I nodded. We finished dinner. The evening was careful and slightly formal and not unkind. We talked about Lily, about my father's retirement, about a trip my mother had been planning. Normal things, the surface of things. I drove home and sat in my car in the driveway for a while. I thought, this is what it is now, not what I had before. Not the Sunday dinners, the easy familiarity, the assumption of safety. But something, a reduced thing, an honest thing. I could live with an honest thing. Lily graduated from high school on a Saturday in June. She was 18, 5'7", serious in the way she had always been serious, prone to questions that required actual answers. She had her mother's eyes and something in the set of her jaw that I recognized as mine. She had chosen a college 2 states away. Her choice, made without drama, announced to me and Rachel on the same evening with the particular efficiency of a person who had spent her childhood watching adults navigate complicated feelings and had decided to be straightforward as a matter of policy. I was proud of that. The ceremony was at the high school stadium, hundreds of kids in green gowns, parents crowded into bleachers in the late morning sun. Rachel was there, seated on the other side of the aisle with her sister. My parents were beside me. We had managed this kind of proximity for 3 years. Civil, careful, a learned thing. Lily walked across the stage. She found me in the stands. That instinct kids always find their parents. She grinned. After in the crowd on the field, she came to me first. She hugged Rachel, she hugged my parents, and then she came and put her arms around me and I held on. You good, I said into the top of her head. So good, she said. She pulled back and looked at me. Dad, she said, thank you. For what you did this? Not for that. She looked at me with the direct, evaluating gaze she'd had since she was 4 years old. For handling everything the way you did, after. I didn't say anything for a moment. You knew things were complicated, I said. I knew you tried to keep it from affecting me. She shrugged, which was her version of something larger. It still did, but less than it could have. You worked really hard at that. I looked at her. This person I had spent 18 years trying to protect from the specific damage of adults who prioritize the wrong things. You turned out pretty well, I said. She rolled her eyes, which was the highest form of affection she generally offered. Then she went to find her friends. My wife betrayed me once. That's not nothing. It cost me years of my life, a marriage I had believed in, a version of myself I had to set down and leave behind. But it was one decision, made by one person, sustained by her failures and her fear. And whatever it is that makes people choose the thing that damages instead of the thing that's true. My family betrayed me every day they chose to keep her secret. Every Sunday dinner, every phone call where my mother told me I was imagining things. Every time Marcus confirmed an alibi. Every morning I woke up inside a lie they had collectively agreed to maintain. That was not one decision. That was hundreds of decisions, made again and again, by people who loved me. I believe they loved me, and who looked at the situation and decided each time that the cost of honesty was higher than the cost of my ignorance. They were wrong. I know they were wrong because I know what it cost. Not the marriage. I had survived the end of the marriage. People survive the end of marriages. I mean the other cost, the one you can't fully name. The way I moved through the world afterward, more careful, more provisioned against the assumption that the people closest to me were seeing me clearly. The way trust became, for me, a thing I extended carefully and in pieces rather than all at once. That was the wound that didn't close. Not fully, not yet, but I had Lily, standing on a field in a green gown, rolling her eyes at me with the comfortable ease of a young woman who knew she was loved. I had that, and I had learned, slowly at some expense, that the family that matters is not the one you're born into. It's the one that tells you the truth.